Hello everyone, I'm Anne Gomand from PC Food in Belgium, the research station for food growing in Belgium, and I will share with you some results on our trials that we have done on improving nitrogen uptake by fertigation on conference. First, I would like to start to give you an overview of why we have chosen the variety conference. It's the most important pear variety that we have at this moment here in Belgium. We are a small country, Belgium, but we have more than 10,000 hectares of pears. The amount of pears is increased a lot for over the last 20 years, and more than 90% of these pears is from the cultivar conference. So it's a very important variety for us. The standard nutrition that is done here in Belgium is done on the black strip with perilled ammonium or calcium nitrate. We split it up normally on two fractions, 2 to 4 weeks before the flowering period, and another dose is given in June when the shoots are stopped with growing. So let's say 2 months before harvest. So you see here in this table what normal the dosage is that the growers are using in practice. And it's combined with some leaf fertilizers during the season. But a lot has been changing in practice in the field for the last 20 years. So we don't have only a big increase in hectares on conference, but also the productivity on per hectare increased a lot. So the export of conference is getting more and more important. So we need very good quality for long exports. But also the market is asking for bigger pears. And we have had several very dry seasons, especially the last 3 years. So a lot of growers, because they want to have the big pears because they get the good price for, and we have the dry seasons, a lot of growers have been investing in drip irrigation to get these bigger pears and to prevent the trees from a drying period. So that's why we have done a trial on fertigation. This trial is one of the parts in a bigger scientific project that has been paid by the Flemish government here in Belgium. You see here all the people who are involved with these trials, with this project, and the project is named the optimization of the nitrogen nutrition on conference to improve food quality. So it's we are involved as PC Food, but also other people from university and from Bodemkundige Dienst in Belgium are involved in this trials. I will point at one part of this bigger project, and that will be on fertigation on conference. So we want to see if there is more efficiency when we use fertigation instead of the perilled nitrogen, ammonium nitrate or calcium nitrate that's been scattered on the black strip. If there is some better efficiency if we use fertigation. Is there a better uptake? Can it give you a better food quality? And at this moment also the environment is more and more important. So we want to see maybe that with fertigation, there will be less flushing of nitrogen into the soil and into the water. So maybe it is better for the environment as well. If fertigation is more efficient than the standard application, maybe it's also possible to reduce the dose of the nitrogen. So that's also one of our treatments in our trial. And we have also been focusing on the summer application. So you have seen that we normally give one bigger fraction before spring and a smaller fraction in the summer. but we want to see where the summer fraction is going. What's the effect on the fruits of that year? And maybe even there is an effect on the next year as well. So that are the questions that we have in this project. Here you see the trial. So we started from the standard 50 kilos nitrogen during spring and 20 kilo of nitrogen per hectare in June. That this number one is the standard application, so prilled calcium nitrate on the soil. Number two is then the same dosage, but then with fertigation, same time of application. Number three is reduced nitrogen dosage with 25%. So we have given here 30 kilo in March and 15 kilo nitrogen in June. And for number four, we are working with in total 60 kilo, just like treatment number one and number two, but split over 6 applications during the whole season. So that are the plots that we have in this trial. So it's on conference and the trees are standing on Quince C. The trial is done in 4 repetitions. We have done a lot of measurements here: production, fruit weight, flower buds, tree vigor, mineral content of the fruits and the leaves, but also the fruit quality, because a lot of pears are going into the storage rooms and are coming out later. So then they need to have the good quality as well after storage and during shelf life. And we have also measured the mineralization in the ground, in the soil. So these are all the parameters involved in this trial. But we are focusing now on the results of 2019 and 2020. The trial started in 2018, but then you still have an effect of the nutrition of 2017. So for this meeting, we are focusing on the results of 2019 and 2020. Here you see the results on the tree vigor. For the tree vigor, we measured 30 shoots per petition at the end of the season, so 31-year-old shoots. And you see here the main shoot length at the end of the season, end of November and 2019 and 2020. And if you see to the results of 2019, you see that there are no big differences in shoot length between the different treatments. Only the control trees, so the trees without nutrition, so at that moment they had 2 years without nitrogen, they had a tendency to have shorter shoots, but it was not statistically different. For the application with 6 times 10 kilos spread during the whole season, we were expecting longer shoots because you are giving every month some more nitrogen. But in 2019, there was no effect on the shoot length, so they were as long as the other treated objects. For 2020, if you see here the results, then you see that it's a bit different. So here you have what we expected for 6 times 10 kilo. You see here that the shoots were longer at that moment, at the end of 2020. So the shoot growing was going on a bit longer compared to the others, and a bit longer would be a few weeks, because you see there is a difference of somewhere around 12 to 13 centimeters. So that's a lot. That can be a problem because that can increase problems with some pests, because you get more tree vigor into the trees. So certainly on very vigorous trees. That can be an advance for trees with a low vigor, but this is not good for trees with a higher vigor level. If you see to the results of the 40 plus 20 kilo and the 30 plus 15, so the 25% reduction of the nitrogen, you see there was no influence on the shoot length. These are the results of the production from the last 3 years, and then you see that only in 2019 the control trees, so the trees without nutrition, nitrogen nutrition, had a lower production, but for all the other treatments, production was almost comparable, and also the number of flower buds, the fruit set per flower buds, there were no statistically differences between all 4 other treatments. Even in 2020, where you had a control that had 3 years no nitrogen, had even a production comparable to the other plots. We have also been analyzing the fruits for the mineral content of the different mineral elements. Here we will only watch to the nitrogen level. And the red lines are giving the threshold value that we are using here on conference pairs. So it's between 50 and 80 milligrams nitrogen per 100 grams fresh food weight that that we want to have for good quality. That is, these thresholds are based on results from several years on trials. And you see here that for 2019, that it was very hard for most treatments to get on the threshold value of 15 milligrams. So only 6 times 10 kilo. So the spread application with fertigation had a good result with 60, but most other plots had more problems with getting a good nitrogen level in the foods. It was because 2019 was a very dry year, but also 2020 was a very dry year, and there is irrigation in this parcel. So we would expect that it must be better in 2019. In 2020, you see that all the plots with nitrogen applications had a better amount of nitrogen in the fruits, and there were no big differences between the standard application and the applications with fertigation. Also here you see that the reduction with 25%, so the plot with 30 plus 15 kilo nitrogen is doing almost as good as the 40 plus 20 kilo nitrogen. Also the 6 times 10 kilo was doing it very good in 2009 and 2020. The only thing what we see is that if you see the variation, that there has been a smaller variation with fertigation, bit more variation when the application is the standard way of application, the scattered one, with a prilled nitrogen on the black strip. You get more variation between the fruits. So that means that the homogeneous, your pairs are less homogeneous in food quality, and with fertigation you had a plot with more homogeneous food quality. So that's a positive effect of fertigation for the market. We have been focusing also on the summer nitrogen application. So in 2019, we have used a small part of 15N labeled nitrogen for the summer gift. And then we have been looking on the food quality in the 15N in the pairs of 2019 and 2020 to see if the effect is there directly in the same year, or is there an effect also in the next year? Is it been built up in the reserve for the next year? Here you see the results from the 15N that has been used, and you see that in the application was done in June 2019, and you see that there is a small amount of that dose of nitrogen that has been used in June is coming into the foods in August at harvest in 2019. So let's say somewhere around 5%. If you measure the pairs from 2020, also looking for the 15N, then you can see that there has been more effect of the application on the pairs of 2020 with the summer fraction of 2019. It's around between 7 and 12% of the nitrogen in the pairs was coming from the summer fraction of 2019. So the effect is bigger on the food quality of the next year than in the year that the application took place. Nitrogen is very important for food quality, and firmness and sugar are one of them, but we see here very small effects of the applications with nitrogen. We are more looking at the green background color for the pears. Green background color is very important for the market because growers get good prices for pears with a green background. And we measure it after storage. The pears are stored in ULO for 4 months, and then we put them on shelf life. And after storage and during shelf life, we are looking for the background color, how it's evaluating. So for 2019, after storage, the control, so the trees without nitrogen nutrition, had already 20% yellow pears, but there were no big differences between the different treatments with nitrogen. So not on when they came out of storage and not during shelf life. This is the result of the pears of 2020. So harvested in August 2020, stored until the beginning of 2021. And then when they came out of storage, in ULO storage. You see here that the control, again, 3 years of no nitrogen application leads to a poor food quality. Only 45% of the pears had still a green background color, and there were already 10% yellow pears. At that moment, all the other treatments were better, and the best one here was the standard application with 75% of the pears with a green background. The plots with fertigation were a bit less in quality. Around 60% of the pears had a green background. And the differences between the standard application and the fertigation also continued at that level during shelf life. Here you see again, there is no difference between the 40 plus 20 kilo with fertigation or 30 plus 15. So there was no effect of the reduction of 25% nutrition here in this trial. We have also been sampling the soil at different moments. That was done by our colleagues of the Bodemkundige Dienst. They have done it several times, and normally they have tried to measure it into a depth of 90 centimeters, but it was a very dry season, so it was not always possible. Sometimes they had to stop at 60 centimeters. You see here that the first application, the first samples were taken at 24th of April. That was 1 month after the application of March was done. And you see that standard treatment had the highest amount of free nitrogen for uptake in the soil at that moment. Also later in June, the two treatments with 40 kilos of nitrogen, fertigation or standard, had a high amount of nitrogen in free nitrogen in the soil, so ready for uptake. But if you compare it with the results in the fruits, we have not seen that there were higher levels of nitrogen in the pears with these two plots. So it is very difficult for us to find a good correlation between the soil samples and the results of the nitrogen in the pears at the end of the season. Another thing is more at the end of the season. That's what we also have seen in other trials, is that with fertigation during the summer, you get more mineralization during autumn, and that can give you more problems with flushing of nitrogen into the soil and also into the water later on when it's getting a wet autumn. So that's not so good for the environment. So it's important to use not a lot of nitrogen at the end of the season. So we come to our last slide. That's a conclusion. We have seen now that it's possible to work with fertigation instead of the standard applications of nitrogen scattered on the black strip. So certainly for dry seasons, it can be a solution to work with fertigation, because we have seen some years now that in March and April there is not a lot of rain, so then that can be a positive effect to work with fertigation. Then we have seen that fertigation gives you less variation in the nitrogen level in the pairs, so you get a more homogeneous food quality. So that's an important point for the market. With fertigation, it is possible to stagger the dosage, as we have done here, 6 times 10 kilos, so you can spread it over the season. That can be possible for trees with a weak growth, to create more vigor into the trees, and because then you get also bigger pairs normally. But it's not good to do it on very vigorous trees, because then you have seen also that growth in the trees is continuing too long during the season, and that's not good for other pests that you can get. Fertigation can lead to more free nitrogen in the soil during autumn, certainly when you are using calcium nitrate just around harvest. So that's not the most ideal moment to use nitrogen, because then you can have problems with the flush of nitrogen into the ground and into the water. So that's not good for the environment. So now in 2021, we are also looking for making shorter periods between the 6 times of applications, so that we don't need to come just before harvest with our last application. So this is my presentation. I will see if there are some questions left. I hope to hear something.